Hey everyone, yesterday was September 11th. It was a 10-year anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center. One of the questions people often ask when something like that happens is, where were you when you heard the news? So for me personally, I was in a meeting room waiting for a 9 o'clock meeting. A couple of people walked in and they were talking about it, and I asked them what they were talking about, and one of them said, a plane hit the World Trade Center. So I'd been to New York a few years before that, and the guys that I worked with there decided to take me out for dinner, and one of the first things they did was walk me over to the World Trade Center, and I stood between the two buildings and took a picture. Now the building I worked in was right behind Trinity Church. If you know anything about New York City, you know where that is. It's a really old church. I remember seeing a photo of that church after the buildings fell, and it was just completely covered in dirt. And the building I was working in was directly behind it. I remember thinking, if I'd been there that day, I would have been engulfed by that dust cloud. Anyway, when I heard the news, the first thing I thought was, okay, it must be a small plane. It didn't even dawn on me that it would be a jet. It just didn't make any sense. After the meeting was over, I went to my desk to see if I could find out any more information. I tried to go to CNN.com, and of course, I couldn't get to the site. Any site I tried to get on the internet, I couldn't get to. It's like the internet had gone down. Now my boss, who was in his office, actually was able to get a local radio station through the internet. So we went into his office and we were listening. We found out that another plane had hit and that there was more hijacked planes. At one point they were saying there was possibly 7 or 8. And then we heard the news that both buildings had collapsed. And then we knew at that point that something big was happening, something really big. Now the only TV in the place where I worked was down in the gym, so I decided to go down there and have a look. And CNN was covering it live, and there was people in there, and I'll just never forget the looks on their faces. I mean, just utter shock, terror, just couldn't believe what they were seeing. One of the things that's interesting that I reflect on is the radio announcer in my city said that there's only one person he could think who would be responsible for this, and that was Osama bin Laden. I had never heard the guy's name before in my life. A man in Tacoma, Washington went over to his neighbor's house because he needed a little help. He wasn't there to borrow a tool or maybe, a cup of sugar. He wanted his neighbors to help him dispose of a body. Now the neighbors said that they heard what they thought were fireworks. An hour later, this guy shows up and asks them if he can help them sell some crack cocaine. He returned sometime later and then asked them if they could help him dispose of a body. I just realized I wasn't sitting up straight, so for the rest of the video you'll actually see this fat part of my neck. So this guy murders somebody, steals his crack, then he asks his neighbor to help him sell the rock and dispose of the body. Now when my neighbor comes over to the house, it's usually to borrow my drill. Now I think if you commit a crime and you really want to get away with it, going over and asking the neighbor should be at the very bottom of your list. I mean, unless you did a background check on them and you're 100% confident that dope peddling and murder is really cool with them, it's probably just best to assume that you're on your own with this one. Now one thing's for sure, if I heard the doorbell ring and the guy at the door was kind of twitchy, I would probably think twice about opening the door. Now there's definitely signs that you could look for that would indicate that maybe your neighbor has lost his marbles. For example, say he's holding a bloody sword, he keeps punching himself in the testicles, or he starts every sentence with, my invisible friend Chico told me to tell you that. A man in Ogden, Utah is in trouble with the law when he was caught butchering a cow in his driveway. So his neighbors called the cops after hearing a gunshot and noticing the man had a dead cow in his driveway. Now when the cops rolled up, the man was in the middle of removing the cow's head. Now the man claims that the cow was dead when it was delivered. Really? So there are companies out there that will deliver a dead cow to your driveway? I guess there's some disassembly required. Now it didn't say if the man was actually charged with anything. Prosecutors are reviewing the case and may try to charge him with health code violations. But I'm not really sure it's illegal to butcher an animal on your own property. I mean, how is it different from doing it in your kitchen? Heck, why not have the kids set up a beef and lemonade stand? I mean, who doesn't want a cool, refreshing beverage and a fresh steak? Maybe he could put up a table and have a garage sale. I mean, who wouldn't want to buy a cow head to hang on the wall in their rec room? Still, I can see that some people might find it disturbing to see somebody butchering a cow in their driveway, especially if he was using a chainsaw and he had a Freddy Krueger mask on. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.